Hey, how's it going, guys? So we're going to do a quick tutorial here on drawing plans, sections, axonometric views, and elevations of your object. So right off the bat, what I've gone ahead and done is selected the iteration. I know you guys have done dozens, if not hundreds of them at this point. So very importantly, you'll see I just have one thing in my model here, this piece. And so how you can go about doing that easily is by selecting the object in your crazy field of things. Go to File, Export Selected, and that's going to quickly let you export a 3DM file of just the pieces and the layers that you need. Um, that's great. I've also put in a uh, box here. I'll redraw it. So I just click onto my plane here, and I want my directions to be 1 foot by 1 foot by 6 feet, which I'd like to think is how tall I am. And this is going to make a scale tool that you can use to make sure that your units are correct, which we can check by doing the command units. It's going to tell us perfect, we're in feet, and also that our model is the right size. So it's entirely possible that you brought it in and all of the iterations you've done have been in millimeters. Okay. You'll have to change the units in there. We've gone over that before in the tutorials, but draw this object in here to make sure your scale is correct. And we'll actually go ahead and leave it there for the rest of the tutorial, just so we can make sure we're understanding the size of the things we're drawing. Okay, so I've got a couple of layers here, cutting surface and clipping plane. Um, and I want you to go ahead and create those two layers here. We're going to create a lot more layers today, but for now, that's going to be where we're going to start. So go ahead and create those. And while you do that, I will show you also if you want your viewport to look like this, which I really would recommend for drawing plans and sections and elevations. Um, First of all, you're going to select your object. Oh, sorry. First, you're going to go into your viewport layout tab up here. You're going to click the For Viewports option. Perfect. And then something that a lot of people don't use, it's really helpful, is if you select what you're going to be working on. We just have this one thing in this model, so it's pretty simple. And then you click this Synchronize Views option. That's going to lock everything, or it's going to set everything such that we're looking at the same distance from at the same piece from the different directions. So if I zoom in, click Synchronize Views here, we're going to see it jump forward. Pretty great. So now that you've got these clipping plane and cutting surfaces uh, uh, pieces in here, what we're actually going to do is go into cutting surface and we're going to create a sublayer called plan. And we're going to go back to here, create another sublayer called section. Okay, so first what we're going to do is we're going to draw two planes on their respective layers. First, I'm going to draw my plan plane. So I'm going to select surface from 3 or 4 corner points. I'm going to go into my top view on the right here, right, which we realize is looking straight down at the top of my view. And I'm going to simply follow the commands to draw a plane. And so now that we've got the plane drawn, right, you'll see it isn't a perfect square. If your OCD goes crazy, you can fix it, but it's going to be pretty effective, for example, to be able to see which side we're looking at right now. So what we're going to do first of all is we're going to position this um, plane by dragging the arrow. So we're not just going to randomly grab it and move it around. We're going to position it with the arrows, and we're going to find, this is really important, based on the narrative of your project, uh, about the intersections of the meeting points at the intersections of cones or the suggestion of space based on the volume. Whatever this is, whatever you've talked about with your professor as sort of the thesis of your project, you're going to choose a plan drawing that helps you talk about that narrative. So you're not just randomly going to cut a piece out of it. You're going to pick an important point in your project. And so what we're going to do here, I'm actually going to drag this green square on the back here to stretch this out a little bit bigger. I'm going to select it and I can move it up in either of these views and pick the point that I think will be the perfect moment to talk about my project. And so we know from what a plan drawing is that it's going to be looking down and remove this section here. And so I might say that an important part of my project is right at this point where you can see the concentric circle of the cone, but you also can see the border of the cone, so you can see the twisted relation. That's just about my project. So um, that's where I pick that plane to be. Okay, great. So we've got that one in there. So now we're actually going to go to the section here, and we're going to turn off our plan plane. Perfect. So now we're going to go into the front view. This happens to be the one that I want to pick to draw my section of, but you just as easily could choose the right view. So I'm going to go into my front view. I'm going to select my plane from three surfaces, draw it in just like we did before. And once again, I might drag this, stretch it out a little bit. And I'm going to use the combination of all of these viewports to understand where it's going to go. So I'm going to slide it in, right? I'm going to maybe move in perspective, but really I'm going to move in plan view, right? Because remember from your earlier exercises, you know where a section is cut by looking at the plan. So I'm going to make it a little bit longer. And I know about my project that I want this section to be cut right through the center of this leg and then through sort of the heart of my project. Great. So we've got our plan and our section pieces in like this. Perfect. We'll worry about the elevation in a moment, but for the time being, this is a really good start. So we'll go to our plan first. So we'll go over to our plan layer and we'll turn off our section. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add a clipping plane, which you may or may not have used, but we're going to use it as a tool in combination with Make2D to help you get sort of a jump start on your drawing. So because we've already picked our plane, this piece right here, we're going to add a clipping plane onto this surface. Sounds like, what the heck? That sounds impossible. Very straightforward. We're just going to use the command clipping plane. So we enter clipping plane. You'll see just like when we use planar surface, it asks us to um, pick the parameters of our plane. Pick the corners, one here, and we can check because we've got the synchronized viewport. We can see exactly what's going on. Right here, you can see that it's picking the surface just like I want it. So this is great. So what it's done is it's cut off um, the top of my shape in my view. So why can I see the can't see the top here, but I can see the top here. So what you need to do is go into this plane, each of your different viewports, and say enable clipping plane. Select clipping plane, and you're going to enable it. Exactly the same one in the next one. Boom, and boom. So now you can see the clipping plane in all four views. And so what we're going to do for the time being, oh, and I actually made a mistake that I hope you caught already. I'm going to select my clipping plane and I'm going to move it to my clipping plane layer. So I'm going to right click on clipping plane and move to change objects to clipping plane layer. So I've gone ahead and made my clipping plane layer red here, which is going to be helpful because now we can really clearly see what's going on. So actually at this point, what I can do is I can turn off and go to my clipping plane. I can go to my default layer. I can turn off my clipping plane and I can turn off our plan plane. So now all we've got is this red line here that shows where we cut it, where our project is most interesting, where we want to talk about our project. This is going to be the start of our plan drawing. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to do a new command called make2d. And so what this is going to do is it's going to make a flat set of lines of the viewport that we're looking at. So follow, if you're not already, follow carefully along in this section. I'm going to do the command make to the number 2d, press enter. And very important that you copy the options that I have picked in here. Most importantly, that we are taking the view we're using is the top view, as made clear here. We are using the view projection option. We are picking up the object properties from the input layers, and we are going to also include the clipping plane intersection. That means where that clipping plane shows up on our piece is going to give us a line. This line is a intersection or a contour or a section line from our shape. This line is going to be really important because Make 2D can be a little bit jumbled, and so that line is going to give you a clear narrative about how to edit your drawing and work with your project. Okay, great. And so we're going to go ahead and label this layer name. It's going to create a new layer automatically. We're going to create a new layer called plan drawing. Perfect. So we're just going to hit OK. It's going to take a little bit of time. And then if we scroll over in our top view, we can see it went ahead and drew our uh, shape that we gave it here. It turned it into a set of lines. And so I'm going to close this and go into our new layer that was created, plan drawing. So you can see how in the next, when we do the section, we're going to do an operation called, we're going to name our layers in our Make 2D section drawing. We can see when we open plan drawing here, we have two different layers, curves and clipping plane intersection. So there's already something weird, right? If we look back at our shape here and we look at this, we're going to notice right away, what the heck is this? What the heck is this? What these things should not be there. I should not be able to see that. And so why I had you select that clipping plane intersection, if we go ahead and turn off curves, we can see this really nice, simple line that is our section cut line. That's really, really awesome that we got that out. Um, that's going to be the key component to drawing these things. That is going to show us where we're cutting it. So you're going to go ahead and turn back on curves, and you can go through here, select, turn back off curves. You're going to go in here, go ahead and select all of this and join them into one close. It'll come out as one closed curve as long as your geometry was correctly booleaned. If it isn't, you can go ahead and close it. Um, So now we've got one line named on clipping plane intersection. You know from the other tutorials, and if you're not familiar with this, you might need to go back, but you can go ahead and change the print color, the print width. All of these different components can be edited now that we've got this on its own layer. So when we turn back on curves, we see we've got a lot of lines that we're not really sure about. For example, we know from looking at this that this should not be visible. So I can go ahead and delete it. As an example, I just pressed delete there, but you also could use the command trim and trim the pieces that you don't want. So I don't want these pieces. I don't want this. This piece is not touching anything, so I need to go ahead and delete that and go ahead and delete that. And we've also got, so these lines back here, we know from looking at this, are showing something behind the section cut line, right? And so you know that you might want to make your clipping plane lines have a higher line weight, or also known as print width, than your basic line. So we might give this line has a print width of 0.13 because of how I set it, and the section cut line, this one, has a print width of 0.5. So this is going to give you a lot of ease in creating these section drawings. And you can see we've got our person, or I guess he's just a square. He's made it in over here. Um, and so this can be an important tool for sort of thinking about maybe how much size uh, you might want to create or might have inside your shape. So that's great. So I'm going to go back over to my layers here. I've got my plan drawing layer. Now, your drawing isn't necessarily done at this point. You may want to, for example, hatch the inside of this piece. That's certainly an option. You may want to add in dotted lines. Um, there's a whole variety of things you can talk about with your professor about what you might include in a valuable drawing, and you now know how to get different pieces of that drawing from here into here. So a lot of you are familiar with the extract wireframe option. And so if we do extract wireframe and then make 2D, and we put it on our plan drawing layer, you can see all of this other line geometry that you can bring in if you wanted to draw different components or talk about a different section of your project. For the time being, we're just going to stick with this simple plan drawing. And I'm actually just for example's sake, I'm just going to do it on this one. I'm going to up this to 1, which is really high. And I'm going to turn on the command print width just to show you how quickly it is. Sorry, print display, just to show you how easy it is to make a simple two line weight section drawing or plan drawing of your project. So this is the start of your plan drawing here. That's great. So we're going to go ahead and turn off the plan drawing layer altogether. We're actually going to go ahead and turn on the clipping plane, and we're going to make sure that we've got our plan plane, which we use to build our clipping plane, off, and we're going to go ahead and take our section plane here. So we can see, you'll recognize this from your drawings, this is going to be the place in which you would draw your flags on your plan drawing to show where your sections are cut. So I'm going to take this clipping plane that I've got here. You notice I'm working in plan and section here uh, ortholinearly, just in the XY plane. This is going to make it so much easier. And I've oriented my object such that it also exists in the XY plane. So I'm going to hold Shift here so that it snaps vertically. And we're going to turn our section cut, our clipping plane here. So looking here, it looks like it's in the perfect place, but when we look at the side or at this view, we see that it is not matching up with where we want to cut our object. So I'm going to go into our right view here, move it over, do the command move, click on the bottom of the clipping plane here, add it up here, and we can see now in this front viewport, right? Notice we've stopped using our top viewport. It's still telling us some really important information about our drawing, but we're going to keep everything up just as we have it right now, but we're going to use the front viewport to generate this section drawing. So same process as we did before. We can go ahead and turn off the clipping plane layer. We can turn off our plane here, and we're just given the cut through of our object and the geometry in the background. So we're going to select it, do the command make 2D. We've got front view from object properties from input object, clipping plane intersections. We're going to call this section drawing. Perfect. Takes a second. There it goes. I'm not sure why. Okay. So in top view here, first thing I'm actually going to do is I'm going to drag it over because we know right away that close this layer and this layer, we've now got plan drawing and section drawing. And so you can see these two drawings now exist in space here. Let me turn off print width. Or sorry, print display, which I keep calling print width. Perfect. So we've now got these two different drawings. And so if we go into section drawing and we turn off curves, just like we did before, we select our clipping plane intersections line, we join it, 11 curves joined into one line, perfect. Then we turn on our curves line, we can go in here and say, wow, we got a lot of messiness going on in our inside of our section cut, which we know shouldn't be there. We can go ahead and just like we did before, go ahead and trim it and cut out all of these pieces that we don't want because we want that nice, clean, two-line weight section drawing that you guys are actually going to be familiar with from your very first project. Okay, so you can see that's pretty quick to get that done. Not instant. Go ahead and just delete all of these extra pieces. And for the sake of clarity in our drawing, we'll go into section visible clipping plane intersection and go ahead and change that also to 1. Just so that we can see it when we can see the difference between the two planes. And so I'm actually going to move it do the command move, click here, and move this finished, for now, finished section drawing of my object into line with this piece here. So that's great. We've got our plan and our section started. So these are just a first draft. You'll remember from learning from your case study project, there's a lot to do with plans and sections. But for the time being, this is going to be our starting point. You can start to talk about your section, and you can see how easy it would be that if you, for example, wanted to cut another section or wanted to talk about a different part of your project, this is how you sort of get into that. Because we could, it took me 3 minutes. We could do another one really quickly at a different point, um, and use that to talk about a different part of our project. Great. Okay, so we're going to now basically repeat our process. We're going to turn uh, on the clipping plane, and then we're actually, for the time being, going to delete our clipping plane, which is going to remove our clipping plane from all of our viewports. So now, it didn't delete half of our shape. We've got the rest of it back here, and we're going to keep our cutting surfaces off. We're not using them anymore. And so we've now got our plan drawing and our section drawing in here perfectly. So the axonometric view, I'm sure you can imagine really easily how we're going to do that. So we're just going to use, let's say I want to do an elevation of the opposite side of this. So here I'm looking at the back side of it, right? I'm looking from the same view that this guy's looking at the project. So what I'm going to go do is go into here, set view, and you can see I'm on right view now. Set view and go to left. So that's going to flip me around to the other side of the project. So we're now going to do the make 2D process here. Select it, say make 2D. We can't do clipping plane intersections because we don't have any clipping planes, and we're going to call this, sorry, we're going to call this elevation drawing. And so you can see that's going to create a whole new layer here, and we can simply follow the same process. Go ahead and move it up here. And this may seem like I'm doing a very minimal process, but this is really what your file should look like. If you have a million things going on and you have 25 layers called section drawing 124, just export selected and build something simple like this so that you have a lot of ease of creation for your project. Um, and so this has gone ahead and brought over these curves. And so I may or may not want them. I happen to think that they are helpful in sort of, for example, defining this curve in this space, but actually not helpful in talking about that top surface. And so you can start to see how in this situation, you could start to actually really illustrate and draw this surface at these surfaces, and start to produce some really meaningful and interesting drawings in the process. Okay, great. So we've got a start of an elevation here as well. So we've got our plan, our section, and our elevation. So the last one we're going to produce is going to be a isometric view of our project. So we use the front view, we use the top view, we use the left view. Now we're going to use a perspective view. You'll notice I also use it to make sure that I know what's going on, but now we can really use it to produce the sort of final piece of this project, the final piece of starting to draw this project. So I'm going to use the command underscore isometric. Great. You also, of course, as you're probably more familiar with, can go click here, go to set view isometric, the same output. So I'm going to pick the southwest view, sorry, underscore isometric, and I'm going to pick the southwest view. Perfect. And so now I've got the view of my project that I want to talk about. So when I say I want to talk about or follows my narrative, that's going to vary based on your studio and what your professor and you have been working on with your project. But this is the view that in my made up world, I've picked as the most important view here. So I'm going to go ahead and select it and say make 2D. Because importantly, I'm in isometric view here. And so I was about to do make 2D and I realized that I want to have something in my drawing to prove that I'm in um, isometric view. So what I'm actually going to do is with this whole object selected, I'm going to do the command bounding box. What that's going to do is just follow here, coordinate world, output solids. Actually, I'm going to have it output curves. And I'm going to create a new layer here called, oh, sorry, create a new layer here called bounding box. Make sure I double click on it so that I'm drawing in it. Select my object, do the command bounding box, output, change it to curves. Perfect. And then I'm going to press enter. And so what it's going to do is draw a simple box around the outside of my object. So we know from the line weight tutorials that we can actually go in here, change this line type from continuous to dashed. And we know we won't be able to see it in this viewport yet, but once we do our make 2D here, we'll see that whole thing brought over. So we're still in our isometric view here. I'm going to select both things here, my bounding box and my object, and do make 2D. So importantly in this one, you see we still can't do clipping plane intersections because we don't have a clipping plane, but we're going to notice here, we've had it set this way the whole time, object properties from input objects. That's really important because now we've got a line type definition on our line. So we definitely want to bring that with us. So we're going to go ahead and click into the layer name and name this Axon Drawing, and then click OK. And so we'll see that pop up in our plan view here, and we can go ahead and drag it over to the side here. So same as we did before, we've got an output here, but it's got a lot of pieces that we may or may not want to represent. So as an example, I've chosen to remove these lines in my drawing to make it more clear that these are large flat surfaces, whereas the tube is a complex shape. So this is just what I've chosen to do, but you'll notice when we look at it in parallel view, this is flat. So this drawing no longer has a relationship to this. So if you've for some reason gotten this far in the tutorial on your following along with your project and you haven't finalized your shape, it's obviously very important here to come into this with a final shape in mind. Okay, great. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. So I'm actually done working um, in section and front and parallel. So I'm going to double click into the top view here, and I've got each of my different views here. And for the time being, I'm going to select each one and group it. Select and group. Select and group. Oh, select and group. Perfect. Um, and so something interesting that I could do, for example, is I could move my uh, section such that it is projected directly below my plan drawing by finding the point at which they line up here, right? And projecting down each piece of my drawing such that it lines up. I hope that makes sense about why that's where I'm going to put it. And for the time being, I'm going to put these drawings just in a little grid over here. And this is not the magic answer on the way you should do it, but this is just an example so that we can get to printing. Okay, so we've got these 4 drawings, and I'm actually going to go ahead and do the command text for the time being and label plan section. You should take time to compose this as you want. Don't just follow this tutorial on how it should look. This is up to you. Elevation, you may choose to do this in InDesign or whichever way you're comfortable with. And Axon, just so that we're clear, I'm adding this in here. Cool. So we've gone through the print stuff before, so I'm not going to go through every troubleshooting issue here, but I'm going to do the command print. I'm going to make sure I'm printing in portrait mode. Importantly here, I'm going to have vector selected, vector output, because we are outputting a vector. And under viewport out and scale, we know we want to be in top view, but this scale uh, is is 2% of what? Well, that's 2% of the actual size of our model. But we know that that's correct because it's 1/4 of an inch equals 1 foot. So what we need to do here is just go to set, and we see perfect. We've got our 8.5 by 11. I'm sorry, mine's 11 by 17 piece of paper here. Um, and so we can go ahead and do the command move and move this over so that it includes all of our pieces. And now we've got our all 4 of our drawings illustrated here. So I'm going to go ahead and print this and then open it up. So, and I'm going to make sure as well that I've got my line type set as match pattern definition because we set those couple of exaggerated section cut lines to show you what it might look like. So we're going to go ahead and go to print here, and we've got our dash line there as well. Print, and we will call this section plan tutorial 01. Perfect. Just give me a second. I will open that. Okay, perfect. And I'm going to open that up. And that should have taken over your screen as well. And we can see we've got some really great things. We've got our section and our plan lines really carefully drawn in here. We've got our axon that looks pretty crisp. We've got our text that looks pretty crisp. We do have something odd going on over here, which is that we've got 2 lines printed right next to each other and a little scraggly line from where I deleted it and another little scraggly line over here. This is totally part of the drawing process in Rhino. Now, it took you 2 seconds to print out this sheet, so you can go ahead and go back to your Rhino, zoom in, delete the pieces. You might have to ungroup it if you grouped it like I did. Delete the pieces that you don't want, such as this line, such as this scraggly line, and simply repeat the process of printing it, replace it, and update it. All right, I really hope this tutorial was helpful. If you have any questions, please make sure to come to ISA office hours. We'll be there to help. Thanks for watching.